Hi and welcome. My name is Marcus Breen and you're with Boston Media Theory. This is a show where we interview people and talk to people who have been active in and around Boston in all sorts of areas, academia, as researchers, consultants, activists, poets, and engaged generally in civil society. So today I'm delighted to welcome Ken Yee. Welcome, Ken. Great to see you.
Thank you, Marcus. It's good to be here.
Great. And we're going to talk today about China, but we're also going to, I suppose it's fair to say, engage in what's known as intercultural communication, which is a field I've been involved in research and teaching for quite a few years. And really the object of intercultural communication is not only to encourage communication across cultures, but an understanding of different ethnicities and the different rules and procedures that apply in cultures so that we're more effective communicators. Now, another way to refer to intercultural communication in a less formal way is as a salad bowl. It's also referred to as multiculturalism, but I'll stick with the salad bowl metaphor. So welcome to the salad bowl for this episode of Boston Media Theory. And I want to say, I suppose, Ken, that the most effective way for us to communicate is, of course, in English, which is the predominant language, but I understand that you speak a different language or different languages. But today we're going to be sticking with the dominant language in the United States. But there are several different language groups in the United States which contribute to the richness of that multicultural experience. And of course, as we know from linguistics, from many years of linguistics, language tends to open the door to culture.
Definitely.
Anyway, we're going to stick with the salad bowl, and part of the, I suppose, challenge is to work out what the ingredients are in the salad. And this is going to sound like a pretty bad joke, but you know, you're part of the salad, and of course you're neither a lettuce, nor a cucumber, or a pepper. You're simply a guest. So welcome,
Right.
and it's great to have you here. And we met in the interests of full disclosure through the US-China Friendship Association, and also we are now participants in the No War with China group.
Yes.
So I wanted to start by just inviting you to describe yourself and to tell us how you live and where you live and your experiences of being Chinese in Boston. That's a lot, I know, but maybe
Yes.
just who are you?
Sure. I'll give the quick version of it. I was born in Hong Kong. I came to this country when I was 7. I grew up in Boston. I attended the Boston Public Schools. I attended the oldest school, Josiah Quincy School, and then the oldest public school, Boston Latin School. And then I graduated from Harvard, and I've been in the Boston area ever since. In fact, I have another connection with the city of Newton that we're in. I was assistant principal at the Oak Hill Middle School when it opened in 1997 until I retired in 2015. So, so I grew up, you know, I have the cultural background of Hong Kong and being Chinese, and then I grew up and attended schools here and grew up basically in the Boston area.
Right, so in some ways you're bicultural.
Yes, definitely.
Great, and I am too, but clearly I'm a white person from Australia.
Australia.
Similar kind of Anglo-Saxon heritage, I suppose, or in my case, Irish, but still a similar kind of tradition to the United States, with the diversity of a community. Certainly after, I suppose, the Vietnam War, the end of the Vietnam War, significant transformations in the number of people from Asia moving to the United States. So you preceded that.
Yes,
right?
yes. I mean, I hope you don't mind me saying that, but I've always felt this kind of affinity since your, Irish background with Irish and Chinese, because from my perspective, and it could be a personal perspective, is that both of our cultures have been subjected to domination by more dominant culture in your case as well as in my case. So that's why I always felt an affinity with, say, Irish, because we bond over that being subjugated by other stronger cultures.
Well, that's great to hear. And somewhat surprising, but I think you're absolutely right. And I'm familiar with much of the challenge that faces Ireland as a colony. Part of it's still a colony
Right.
of Britain, and there's still a struggle going on there. China, of course, no longer a colony of anything.
Right.
And that leads us on to what I want to spend a bit of time talking about, and that is the idea that an independent sovereign China has now created a really significant anti-China fervour. I think we could say that. Anti-China fervour in the United States, and with some rather weak-minded allies following the United States being anti-China as well. And let's just talk about that, and if you don't mind, give us your perspective on how you see this kind of anti-Chinese fervour.
Sure. Growing up in Boston, from what I have experienced, I can say that when I was young, as a kid growing up, China was kind of invisible. That was the stage of invisible China, because China was irrelevant and therefore it didn't matter. Growing up, I remember it's like, I don't see any, on television, in the media, any representation of Chinese or Chinese American or Asian American for that matter. So that was the early stage. And then China started producing a lot of material things. So I think it seems like China became more like an obedient China, because after WTO in 2001, China was producing our sneakers, our clothes, gadgets and stuff like that. So China became obedient China and good China. They were even taking our trash, in terms of recycling trash, was being shipped all the way to China. It was like incredible. So that was the obedient China stage. And this is, again, my personal perspective growing up here. And then all of a sudden, in 2017, with the first Trump administration, suddenly China became the threatening China all of a sudden. And from my perspective, it's not so much that China has changed. I mean, China has changed because it brought people out of poverty. It's made incredible strides and brought 800 million people out of poverty, which you hardly ever hear about in the media. So, but the thing is, how did China suddenly become threatening China? And it's just it's inconceivable. But I can at the same time understand why, because before China was making our Nike sneakers and our iPhones and stuff, and then suddenly China is challenging, and it has gone up the value chain, so that instead of making the cheap stuff, it's making high tech and high value items. And as a result, it's competing with the US now. So that's why suddenly obedient China has become threatening China. And in fact, I visited China last year. I went, traveled 2 months in China. I went to Xinjiang. And on top of that, 10 years ago, 2014, well, 11 years ago, when I was working with the Newton Public Schools, I did an exchange between Newton Public Schools and the Jingshan School in Beijing. So I was there for 5 months with a group of Newton students.
Oh, great.
And so I would say I traveled in 2014. I traveled all the way to Tibet, and then last year on my own, I traveled all the way to Xinjiang just to see what's going on. If all the negative things that we hear about in this country, whether it's true or not, and I can happily say that it's not true. So
we get a short history from you there,
right,
of the relationship between what you, I think, correctly call the obedient China, and in some ways we could go even further in a much more critical way and say a subservient China, a China that was really meeting its obligations as a sort of former colonial power, that provided very cheap labour to the United States and to the people who were able to make very, very large profits,
Right.
even super profits from Chinese labour.
You're going
And-
further back. Right.
but-
Further back in like the 1800s?
Well, in the 18th and 19th century, of course,
Right.
it was a matter of not just taking super profits. It was a matter of just putting the entire population into immiseration
Right.
through addiction to heroin.
Well,
Right?
we also
So we know about that.
We also had the building of the railroad. The Chinese from the West Coast and the Irish from the East Coast in terms of a transcontinental
That's
railroad.
right.
So we were laborers basically
That's right.
shipped into this country to meet the needs of building the railroad because we didn't have enough labor in this country.
Maybe that's something I certainly haven't thought about before, and that is this a sort of transformation in the idea that China, from way back even at building the railroads and being people who were expelled around the time of the gold rushes in the 1830s, was it 1860s in the United States, were always seen as both subjects or othered. You know, they were sort of not really part of the white settler
Right.
colony, and perhaps the expectation was that the Chinese would always stay that way. And at the point at which they were no longer seen as being obedient or servile, it created anxiety and created panic within the people who believed that history would go on in just one direction. And now we're in a stage of human development where this can no longer be the case. And maybe it's a matter of dealing with the ignorance of the Western narrative rather than what I just suggested, which is just mischaracterising the Chinese people, because you've got 5,000 years to draw on.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's something that hopefully we can change the mindset, because for a long time, some immigrants, especially immigrants that don't look like the majority in this country, were viewed more as like, what can you provide for us? What can you do for us? If we need you, we'll let you come in. If we don't need you, we'll kick you out. I mean, 1882 was the Chinese Exclusion Act that was passed, and that was the first law to actually prohibit a nationality from coming to this country. So, hopefully, as we get to know each other, then, it's like, the immigrants, they have their own sense of survival, and they have their needs. It's not just what can the immigrants do for the majority in this country, it's that how can we help each other, and how can we, make life easier and better for everybody, not just for the majority of people in this country.
Well, it's a very, very nice thought and a very democratic thought, but it's not a very common thought.
Right.
In conventional American culture, I mean, the idea is we're competing. We compete with each other, and surely part of that competition culture is that we're also competing with China.
Right.
And as you suggested, the Chinese people have gone from making very nice shoes at a low cost, although I think they still do that,
Right.
to making very, very good quality things everywhere. I mean, electric vehicles, I should say, outdoing pretty well everything. Very good computer science. DeepSeek, which was an artificial intelligence application, which was open sourced, which
Right.
was not supposed to happen, right?
Right.
So everybody could access the source code for DeepSeek, as opposed to the traditional idea within the Australian, what am I saying, within the American US system of having private ownership and proprietary ideas. So in some ways the Chinese have just outpaced the United States and then are outperforming them. And do you get a sense that that has produced a kind of panic?
I think that we need to change the paradigm, of a competitive win-lose situation. One analogy that I heard is that instead of looking at it as like we have one pizza pie, a pizza, and we're both trying to eat as much as we can, so therefore it's limited, it's one pizza. The more you eat, the less I eat. The more I eat, the less you eat. So it's a win-lose kind of a situation. So instead of looking at it that way, let's look at it as we're working together to plant a garden, so that the more we can help each other, the more we can assist each other, is that we get more productivity, we grow more food, we both benefit, so that it's a win-win situation rather than we're competing and see who can grab more slices of the pizza. I think that's the mindset and the paradigm shift that we have to do, because China benefited a lot from globalization and free trade. No question about it.
Yep.
China per capita income, if you can believe this, I'm going to throw a little bit of numbers out there, so I know numbers are not good in terms of, but just think about it. China per capita GDP has doubled 6 times in the last 45 years. What does that mean? It means that they went from, earning in 1980 like $200 per capita right now to what they're earning, which is about $15,000 per capita, which is still a lot less than what Americans earning, but they doubled it 6 times. Our equivalent in this country would be, let's say I'm 20 years old in this country, and I started working when I was 20, and I was earning $30,000 a year. Now, if my income doubles 6 times, by the time I'm 65, I would be earning $1.9 million a year.
Goodness.
From $30,000 a year when I was 20 to earning $1.9 million a year. That would be 6-fold, doubling my income 6 times. They did that in China.
For the entire population?
For the entire population. So they benefited a lot from the United States and globalization. But the thing is this, just the fact that they're getting richer and better doesn't mean we're getting worse, because we benefited so much from trading and commerce. We have all, maybe too much stuff, all the stuff we have bought so cheaply, a lot of them are manufactured in China or India or other places. So it's not like we're not benefiting. And you open up your closet, your cupboard at home, and you say, wow, we have so much stuff. Again, maybe too much, but still, we have benefited a lot. But it's a win-win situation. The fact that they're getting richer doesn't mean we're getting poorer.
Not at all. And thank you for those figures. They are truly extraordinary. And I'm sure there are many people watching this show who would like to think that they had done that, doubled their income 6 times in their working lives to end up at that 1 point whatever million it was, right? By the time you retire.
1.9.
Certainly didn't happen to me.
No,
It's pretty rare, but it's remarkable. And what's more important, I think, in some calculations, is what's called price point parity.
Right.
Right.
PPP,
so that,
yeah.
in other words, yes, the PPP, so that what people now can buy in China, even though the GDP is still considerably lower than the United States, what most people can buy in China, that is a basket of goods, is significantly more than what an American can buy,
Right,
or people
right.
in Western Europe. So that really, if you're talking about the capacity to buy consumer items or household items just to live well and to be happy, you've got more ability to do that in China.
Let me give you this one very moving thing that happened to me last year when I went to China. So I was in Guangzhou. I visited my cousin who still lives in Guangzhou. So we went to eat, of course. Guangzhou is like the culinary heaven on earth.
Oh, really? Okay.
And-
Remember that, viewers, next time you go to China.
Guangzhou is like the eating paradise. He would not let me pay. All the times we went to eat, he would refuse to let me pay. And I said, wait a minute, hold on here. I'm making more money than you. I'm retired. I'm traveling. Please, I'm the one who's, a tourist. I'm traveling. Why won't you? And then he looked at me and he said, 30, 40 years ago when you first came and we were so poor, do you remember the first time you visited, you brought over a bicycle? My mom asked me to bring a bicycle for my cousin and my uncle. And he said, oh, that was just so incredibly helpful. And the second time you came, do you remember you brought a refrigerator? Not that I physically brought it, I just, went to the store, bought it, and they shipped it over.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, I remember the bicycle, but I don't remember the refrigerator. And he said, my mom, he said, your mom and your dad helped us so much when we were so poor. And now we're doing well. I'm retired. I'm not wealthy, but I have a roof. I have plenty to eat. I can even go on vacations. We're doing fine. And I will always remember what you and your mom and dad did for us when we really needed it. So that was such a moving story that I was like close to tears when I heard that. It was so just incredibly moving. But I still said, you still have to let me pay for a meal.
And did he?
Yes, he said, all right, we'll let you pay for this one meal.
Happy ending.
Exactly.
In my experience in China, I would certainly say, and I don't have anything quite like that story, but certainly the generosity of Chinese people towards guests is remarkable. Mm-hmm. And whether it's Caucasian people visiting China or whether it's people like in your situation visiting family members or others, the level of generosity is remarkable, and I suspect it really addresses some of the deeper values and ideals within Chinese culture, which is more community-minded, as we know.
Right.
And we have quite a lot of research on this in intercultural communication, just to get back where I started. In terms of we should keep an eye on the time here, but in terms of your own experience of this sort of change in the attitude towards China, do you sort of feel comfortable commenting on the current state of threats against China? We've just seen a new set of tariffs applied not only around the world but directly at China, a hardening of attitudes towards China, talk of a war with China, which we don't want. At a personal level, do you get can you kind of reflect on any sense of that yourself?
Yeah, definitely. As recently as last year, I was there for 2 months. I went all the way to Xinjiang, and saw people living in harmony and peace. Everybody in China wants peace, because the thing that they fear the most is chaos. They call it luan, or chaos, because they've seen it. Chaos during when China was still struggling before 1949 and the war with Japan and all that. And they benefited and have developed, and they have become prosperous because of peace. So peace is the thing that matters the most to them. Again, their six-fold doubling of their income in the last 45 years, they could not have done it with war. So the last thing they want is to have a war or conflict with the United States. And again, they're very pleasant and they're very nice and they're very helpful, like you said. And I've had definitely great experiences and a lot of stories, which may be for another time. But so they definitely want peace. That's the sense I have.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, I think you told me that you have some photographs or some images that we can make available.
Yes.
So let's see if we can see any of those now and put them up on the screen. And is that you?
Yes, that was me. I grew a beer last year when I was this is Xinjiang, and those, I don't know if you can see them, they're camels along the Silk Road that I I traveled along, which was incredible. And yeah, no, that was great.
And the Silk Road, of course, is something we haven't talked about, but this idea of China developing a very complex set of international relations and connections for
Yes.
trade.
So
There you
this
are.
was, I was, again, along the Silk Road. This was a place where they grew grapes because they grow a lot of grapes in Xinjiang, and they make raisins and probably a wine too. So she was definitely a worker there, and she gave me some grapes to try and raisins to try out. So that was fantastic.
I must say, you look pretty good with that beard. Ken. Oh, look at that.
We were having tea. I did this tour at the Yili Caoyuan, or the Yili grass field. To me, it looked like, I mean, not that I know, but it was so beautiful. I would say it's like Switzerland in terms of the beautiful landscape and the lush grassland and the ice-capped mountains. That was just amazing and wonderful. This was also in Xinjiang, and that woman is Uyghur, and the man is the tour guy, and so she was very helpful in the museum, showing all the cultural aspects of Uyghur life, and definitely Uyghur culture is very much cherished and promoted, and so she was a lovely person.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. It's been one of the great challenges, hasn't it, to try and establish an understanding and appreciation for these kinds of images. Look at that. That's a yurt or something. Something
Yeah. This
Mongolian.
was a ceremonial wedding, and again, this is in Xinjiang. Like I said, this is in Switzerland. Snow-capped mountains and grasslands and yurts, and this was a ceremonial wedding. I think these were Kazakh tribes, Kazakh ethnicities. It was great seeing all these ethnic groups living in harmony together. You had Uyghurs and Kazakhs and Mongolians and Han people, just all living in peace and harmony from what I saw in Xinjiang.
I think your enthusiasm, oh, look at this, your enthusiasm.
This was a Three Gorges, and I did this tour, and I was rowing this boat. The landscape was beautiful. Three Gorges Dam, I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the
massive.
biggest, yeah. So this was a beautiful experience.
Right, we'll leave it there. Thank you to our friends in the control room. I think it's also quite clear that one of the points that the Chinese themselves make, but comes through both your enthusiasm and through the images, is the importance of having direct experience of China, of travelling to China, of experiencing their salad bowl, if you like, their multiculturalism.
Exactly.
It's not without some challenges. There is a dominant Han population, like there's a dominant white population here, but the integration of other cultures across the society of China, as I understand it, is something that's been kind of an ambition of the government to say we are going to be a multicultural society.
If I may just jump in briefly,
Please.
I've been watching YouTube's this man called Speed. I don't know if you heard of him.
Yes.
He's in China now, and it's incredible. He's doing like a multi-million-dollar campaign, although he's not getting paid for it. But he's promoting China, basically to counter a lot of the negative images that our government in the U.S. has been promoting. So like you said, best thing to do, if you can, travel to China, like the Newton Jingshan program, the U.S.-China People's Progressive Association, Code Pink has China's Not Our Enemy, as well as MAPA, Massachusetts
Peace Action.
Peace Action. So, as much as you can, go there and experience it.
All right, thank you, Ken. We've got to wrap up now, so I thank you very much for your contributions and for the wonderful enthusiasm about seeking not only peace with China, but understanding with the best that we can bring to the table, as it were, in the pursuit of peace and the pursuit of cooperation. So thank you. So that's all from me, from Boston Media Theory. Until next time, keep on mediating. you.